The handle of my coffee mug was pointing at me, and that's how I knew something was wrong. It was Thanksgiving, the good china out, the turkey already carved down to the frame, and my daughter had reached across the table while she was laughing at something. The man beside her said, and turned my mug a half turn so the handle faced my chest. She did it without looking. She did it the way you scratch your nose. Nobody else at that table would have caught it, and the man beside her, the one she'd brought home for the first time, the one who'd shaken my hand at the door with both of his, certainly didn't catch it. But I caught it because that mug turn is the oldest message between my daughter and me. Older than her driver's license, older than the first boy who broke her heart. When she was 4, she used to get overwhelmed at big family suppers. Too many voices, too many aunts pinching her cheeks, my late mother-in-law's house thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of boiled cabbage. She'd start spinning her juice cup on the table, around and around, and I learned that the spinning meant she was about to come apart. So we made a deal, the two of us, a private one. If it ever got to be too much and she didn't want to make a scene, she'd just turn a cup toward me. Any cup. And I'd find a reason for the two of us to step outside and look at the stars, or check on the dog, or anything at all. Turn the handle toward Dad. That's all it took. Get me out of here. She's 28 now. She hadn't used that signal in 15 years. And she just used it at my own dining room table, in front of a man she'd introduced as the person she was building a life with. I smiled and reached for the gravy boat and asked him another question about his work, and I kept my face exactly where it had been, because the one thing I have always been able to do, the thing that paid for this house and that kitchen table and the gravy boat, is keep my face still while my whole insides go cold. My name is Desmond Cormier. I'm 64 years old, and I spent 31 years taking apart financial fraud for a living. 20 of those were with the RCMP's commercial crime section, working out of the Halifax office, and the last 11 I spent as a forensic accountant for hire. The fellow that law firms and the Securities Commission brought in when the numbers on a page were lying, and somebody needed to prove how. I've sat across boardroom tables and kitchen tables from men who could sell you your own watch and have you thanking them. I've watched retirees describe in flat little voices how they handed over everything they had to somebody warm and patient and convincing. I know what it looks like when a person is being worked, and I was looking at it right now at my own table on Thanksgiving while my wife passed the dinner rolls. The man's name was Curtis. He was maybe 40, well put together in that quiet way that costs money. A good sweater, a watch that wasn't loud but wasn't cheap, the kind of haircut you don't get at the barber shop in town. He described himself, when I'd asked, as a private legacy strategist, not a financial advisor, not an investment broker, a private legacy strategist. He'd said it the way a man says a title he's practiced in the mirror, with a little pause before it, like he was handing you something fragile. He worked, he explained, with a small number of families. Helping them protect generational wealth was how he put it. Moving assets out of the reach of, and here he smiled a warm and sorrowful smile. The institutions that are designed to bleed you slowly. There's a whole architecture, he said, that the banks will never tell you about, because the banks make their money keeping you in products that barely beat inflation. Private credit, land-backed instruments, structured legacy trusts. He used the word legacy a great deal. He used it like a man laying down a soft blanket. My wife asked him in her easy way how a person even got into a line of work like that, and he told a story about his own grandmother losing her pension to a bank that folded, and how he'd promised himself he'd never let a family he cared about be that vulnerable. It was a good story. It was a very good story. It had a wound in it, and it had a vow, and it explained in advance why he might one day ask you to move your money somewhere unusual. I've heard 1,000 of these. The good ones always come with a wound. After supper, my daughter and Curtis offered to do the dishes, and my wife, Maureen, 38 years married and able to read me like a weather map, said, No, the two of you sit. Des and I will handle it, your guests. And she steered them into the living room with coffee, and the second the kitchen door swung shut behind us, she turned on the tap to cover her voice and said quietly, You went still. At the table. When he started talking about the banks. You noticed that. I've been watching your face since before she was born, she said. What did you see? She turned my mug toward me. Maureen's hand stopped in the dishwater. She knew exactly what that meant. We'd invented that signal together, the two of us, when our girl was small. When she was laughing the hardest, I said. That's what's got me. She was performing being happy and asking me for help at the same time. She's scared and she doesn't want him to see it. We didn't get a real chance to talk to her that night. They drove back to the city, the two of them in his car. And I stood in the driveway in the cold and waved like an ordinary father. And the whole way down our street, his taillights looked to me like the back end of something I'd spent 30 years chasing. She called me 2 days later, lunchtime. I was in the garage pretending to sort screws. "Dad," she said, and then nothing for a few seconds, just her breathing, and I knew. You learn the particular quiet that comes before a person tells you something they've been carrying alone for a while. "I'm here, sweetheart," I said. "Take your time." They came out in pieces. He'd moved into her apartment 6 weeks ago. His lease was up, he said, and he just needed a couple of months to find the right place, and she hadn't thought twice, because by then she was in love, and a man you love needing a soft place to land is not a red flag. It's a Tuesday. But then he'd started, gently, so gently, talking about her money. Here's the part that turned my stomach. My daughter had money. Not a fortune, but real money. The kind that changes a young person's whole future. Her grandmother, my wife's mother, the same woman whose smoky kitchen we'd invented the mug signal in, had died 2 years back and left almost everything to my daughter, her only grandchild. After the estate settled, it came to a little over $300,000. We'd helped her park most of it sensibly, some in her RSP, a good chunk in a TFSA, the rest in a boring index fund that did what boring index funds do. She'd been proud of herself. She'd called it her grandmother's gift, and she'd promised herself she wouldn't be stupid with it. And now there was Curtis, telling her the boring index fund was a slow leak, telling her grandmother would have wanted that money to grow, really grow, into something that could buy a house and start a family and matter. He'd shown her documents, a prospectus, he called it, for something named the Meridian Heritage Private Trust. Glossy. Logos. A registered office on a real street in Toronto. 8 years of performance charts climbing up and to the right like a staircase to heaven. He told her the trust only opened to new families a few times a year and that the next window closed at the end of the month, and that he could get her in because of who he was, but that she'd have to decide soon. "He hasn't asked me to actually sign anything yet," she said, "but it's coming. He keeps saying we should do it together, as partners. He's been talking about putting both our names on things. He wants me to give him," and she stopped, and I heard her swallow. "He said it would be smart for me to give him power of attorney over the accounts, so he could move quickly when the window opened, because I'm bad with paperwork." He said it like it was romantic, Dad, like it was us against the world. I closed my eyes and leaned my forehead against the cold metal of the garage shelf. "And you turned my mug at Thanksgiving," I said. "I didn't even decide to," she said, and now she was crying, the way she cried as a kid, trying to do it quietly so it wouldn't count. My hand just did it. I felt sick for weeks, and I couldn't figure out why. "Because he's so nice, Dad. He's so nice." And I kept telling myself I was being paranoid and ungrateful, and then I was sitting at your table and my hand just turned the cup, like it remembered before I did. "Listen to me," I said. "That feeling in your gut that you've been calling paranoid, that's the smartest part of you. It's been trying to get a word in for weeks. I need you to stop arguing with it." I asked her to do one thing before we hung up. Forward me everything. The prospectus, the emails, anything he'd sent in writing. Don't print it, don't mention it. Just forward it to my personal address and then go on being exactly who you've been so he doesn't feel the floor shift. She said okay in a small, steady voice, and I have never in my life been prouder of a single okay. The Meridian Heritage Private Trust Prospectus was 22 pages. I read it 3 times that night at the kitchen table with my reading glasses and a yellow pad, and the more I read the colder I got, because it was good. It was professionally good. Whoever built it knew exactly which boxes a nervous person checks before they hand over their money, and they checked all of them with a clean, confident hand. And every single one was hollow. The 8-year performance chart cited no auditor. None. A real fund has its numbers checked by an accounting firm whose name and license you can verify, and that name is printed right there. Because the whole point is to be checkable. This one just had a beautiful rising line and a footnote saying past performance reflects internal modeling. Internal modeling. They'd drawn the chart themselves. The trust claimed its returns were secured by physical assets, land, infrastructure, private loans backed by real collateral, but nowhere in 22 pages was there a schedule of what those assets actually were. No addresses, no appraisals, no registry numbers, just the phrase asset-backed over and over, doing the work of a thing it never described. I'd seen that trick 100 times. It's a picture frame with nothing in it. You can tell people there's a Rembrandt inside. And as long as nobody's allowed to look, there's a Rembrandt inside. The registered office on that real Toronto street, I looked it up, was a mail forwarding service. $40 a month gets you that address and a person who scans your envelopes. Not an office. Not a firm. A mailbox with a fancy postal code. And the returns the prospectus dangled. The ones that had made my daughter's eyes go wide, 14 to 19% a year, every year, through good markets and bad. That number isn't a return. It's a confession. There is no legitimate trust on God's green earth that pays 14 to 19% every year without fail. The only thing that produces a line that's smooth is a lie, or a Ponzi, which is just a lie with a clock running. I knew two people I could call. The first was a woman I'd worked alongside for the better part of 15 years, who'd run market fraud files and now sat with the provincial securities regulator. We'd never been close exactly, but we'd carried hard cases together, the kind that follow you home and that builds a particular trust. The second was a forensic accountant I'd brought onto 3 of my own files after I retired, who could look at a financial statement and tell you in 20 minutes whether the arithmetic had been built to help you understand or built to help you not. I texted them both that night. I didn't say much. I said I had a live one and it was personal and could we talk first thing. My old colleague called at 8:15 the next morning. I gave her the name Viridian Heritage Private Trust, and I gave her the man's full name and the company name on the prospectus, and she went quiet in that specific way that told me she was already typing. "Give me a couple of hours," she said. "And Des, personal how?" "My daughter," I said. There was a pause. "Okay," she said, and her voice changed, got harder and kinder at the same time. "Okay, I'll move." The accountant called at 9. I read her the sections on the secured assets and the investor protections, and twice she stopped me to make me read a sentence again. When I finished, she didn't say anything for long enough that I checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. "Desmond," she said finally, "there's a clause in here in the protection section that references something called the Heritage Investor Guarantee. Did you see it?" I saw it. It's not defined anywhere. It's not defined because it doesn't exist. It's a comfort word. They put it there for exactly the person who reads carefully enough to look for a safety net and then stops reading the second they find one with a reassuring name. The whole document is built like that. Every place a careful person would put their thumb to check the structure, there's a soft spot dressed up to feel solid. She let out a breath. Whoever wrote this has done it before. You don't get this good at Hollow on your first try. She was right, and my old colleague proved it by lunchtime. The man my daughter had brought to my Thanksgiving table was real, and most of what he told us about himself was not. He'd grown up in the Ottawa Valley, gone to a decent school, and worked for a few years at a legitimate wealth management firm in Mississauga before they let him go. The firm had filed a report. The file was officially closed, but it still existed, and what was in it made the hair on my arms stand up. Because it was the same play. A client, a widower in his 70s, a retired teacher. Curtis had moved $110,000 of the man's savings into an unregistered private fund on his recommendation. By the time the firm caught it, the money was gone, layered out through a credit union account into who knew what. The old man declined to press charges. Family pressure, the note said. He was ashamed. He didn't want his grown children to know how easily he'd been led, this man who'd taught grade 6 for 30 years and thought of himself as no fool. A dry run, a smaller, rougher version of the exact same machine, tried out on a lonely old man, refined and now pointed at my daughter and her grandmother's gift. "Is Meridian registered anywhere?" I asked. "There's no trust by that name registered with any securities regulator in this country," she said. "I checked all of them. It's a ghost." "Des, here's where we are. This man is running a barefaced fraud, and your daughter is." I've thought a lot since that Thanksgiving about why my daughter was the one who walked away whole when 11 other people didn't. It wasn't luck, and it wasn't that she was smarter than a retired school teacher or a couple who lost their whole retirement. It was a chain of small things, each one leading to the next, the way these things always go. Curtis was good because he'd practiced being good on other people's grandparents. The money was nearly gone because he'd built a trap that rewarded trust and punished hesitation. And the only reason it didn't close on Grace was that, weeks before her head would admit anything, her hand reached across my table and turned a coffee mug a half turn toward her father. Cause and effect. Every link mattered. What I keep landing on is that staying safe in this world takes 3 things working together, and you can't skip any of them. The first is having a clear sense of right and wrong that you actually live by. Grace had been raised to believe that her grandmother's gift was a responsibility, not a lottery ticket. And that quiet sense of duty is part of what made her uneasy when a man started treating it like a toy. The second is the plain ability to think, to read a document slowly, to ask who audited this, to notice that an address is just a mailbox, to know in your bones that nobody pays 16% every single year. I spent 31 years building that kind of thinking, but the truth is, most of it is just the willingness to slow down and look. And the third, the one people underestimate, is nerve. It took real backbone for my daughter to sit across a table from a man who'd told her he loved her and let him rob her on tape without her face giving anything away. That's not something you're born with. You build it, one hard thing at a time. I can't hand those 3 things to you through a screen. Nobody can. But I can tell you they're built, not given. And they're built in ordinary moments. The time you choose to do the harder right thing. The time you make yourself finish reading the boring page. The time you sit in the discomfort instead of running from it. Grace had all 3 when it counted because she'd been quietly practicing them her whole life without calling it that. If there's one thing I'd want my daughter's story to leave with you, it's that the warmth in your own heart is not the thing that makes you a target. It's the best part of you. The work isn't to stop trusting. The work is to grow steady enough and clear-eyed enough and brave enough that your trust becomes a thing you give on purpose to people who've earned it, instead of a thing that can be taken. Grace turned a mug. The rest she built herself. So can you.